Hello.
Hi, Justin.
Hello, mate. How are you?
Good, thanks. How are you?
Yeah, good.
We've got a few more to join, so
no stress. All good.
A few minutes.
I've written my name in all capitals, which makes me look intense. Justin Audibert.
Welcome, everyone. I'm going to give it 30 seconds or so for a few more to arrive, and then we'll begin. Okay. Welcome, everyone. There'll be a few more that'll drip in as we go, but we'll make a start. Thank you for joining us for this 57-minute conversation about artistic directorship. My name is George Perrin. I am a former artistic director turned executive coach, and this is the second in what I hope will be a series of conversations all about the craft of being an artistic director, something I am deeply passionate about. I called it "So You Might Want to Be an Artistic Director?" in recognition of how hard it is to actually find out what an artistic director does all day. And until you know that, how do you know you want to dedicate your career to being one? So I was an artistic director for 20 years, pretty much making it up as I went along. It was and remains a role, I think, shrouded in mystery. One part alchemy, one part people, one part art, one part pragmatics, and a whole load of other stuff we just don't know about until it lands in our lap. Since I transitioned from being an artistic director to being an executive coach about 4 years ago, I've worked with a lot of artistic directors, a lot of executive directors, CEOs, and other cultural leaders from organizations across arts, opera, orchestra. And through this work, I see firsthand just how important, rewarding, and yet challenging the responsibility of leading an arts organization is in 2023. So I set myself a challenge to demystify the role and to arm a new generation of aspiring artistic directors with the knowledge, tools, and confidence to become arts leaders of the future. Partly I do that through a free 7-day course that I've written that introduces you to what I think are 7 key skills an artistic director needs. And I posted a link to that in the chat if you want to sign up. And for those wanting to go more in depth, I run a 2-day training and coaching program for a cohort of 5 directors at a time, where we cover everything you need to know from the moment you put in your application to the end of your first year in the job. And again, you can find a link to that in the chat. And then finally, I do it through conversations like this. Last month, I had the pleasure of talking all things artistic directorship with Lisa Sperling, Artistic Director of Theatre 503. And today I am chuffed to bits to be speaking to the recently appointed Artistic Director of one of the UK's finest producing houses, Chichester Festival Theatre, who I will introduce in a moment and who is hopefully pinned to your screen. So I hope this conversation and any that follow in the series will help you better understand the role, decide if it's something you want to pursue, and if it is, that you'll get in touch and see if I can help you on that journey. A bit of housekeeping. So hopefully today we'd like to have quite an open and candid conversation about the role of artistic directorship and about the landscape. And I think in order to do that, Justin and I, please don't kind of pass on anything we talk about today. Keep it in the session. Please keep your microphones off. Happy to keep your cameras on or off. Post any questions in the chat. We'll try and pick them as we go. And the session is being recorded and captioned for archive purposes, and possibly if people kind of signed up but couldn't make it in the end. And I'll share some of the content in other ways afterwards via social channels. I think that's all housekeeping. So it just remains for me to introduce Justin. Justin is the current Artistic Director of Chichester Festival Theatre, who was previously Artistic Director of Unicorn Theatre, freelance theatre directing credits. I mean, I'm not going to list them all. There's a lot of them, but they're at the RSC, they're at the National, they're at Wharton's Music Hall, Southwark Playhouse. Justin's worked at a lot of different theatres, new plays, revivals. He's written plays, directed short films. He's a trustee, and he went to university in Sheffield, which is where he and I first met about 20 years ago. Welcome, Justin. Thanks for being here.
Thanks, George. I was really wondering, is George going to say we've known each other for a very long time? Yeah, because we have.
Yeah, and I don't think we've really chatted about or being artistic director before. So I'm excited about this, as hopefully everyone listening is. Do you want to just introduce yourself and anything to add to that? Anything you think it's important for people to know before I dive?
No. I think that was a really good introduction. And let's go through your questions, George, because I think in some ways, like they will answer some of the stuff, and then like I'm really happy as well to answer as we go from people. Let's crack on. Let's do it.
All right. Okay. Great. So the first thing I would love to know about, and I'm sure everyone here would, is how your first few months have been as the new artistic director of Chichester Festival Theatre.
Yeah. I think there are certain advantages to having done this job before that you don't know the first time you do it, and the second time you kind of can enjoy a little bit. Mm-hmm. So, I'm sure people, when I got the job at the Unicorn, some people in the organisation and outside the organisation were pleased that I had the job, but I was so nervous that I didn't really get to enjoy that. And actually, one of the really nice things about this job is really feeling the welcome from the staff, from people that go to that theatre, from the board and all that stuff, and from some artists, kind of being able to enjoy that a little bit. And actually that's really nice, because I think one of the most difficult things, I don't know if you would agree, George, I mean, you obviously did it with someone else, but I'm sure you still got this, is how lonely it is a lot of the time. And I'm not saying this to be like, poor me, that's the job, that's fine. But it's actually really the kind of really good moments sustain you for the really difficult moments. And actually going into this job, and it is a bit, I could not love the Unicorn Theatre as an organisation and what it does more, or be more proud to have been part of it. And it's so important, but it's not the same scale of organisation as this. The Unicorn has 30 full-time members of staff, 50, 60 casuals. Chichester has 75 full-time members of staff and 200 casual staff. So it's, plus that's not even taking account the artists in commission and all that kind of stuff. It is a bigger thing in scale. But I've really taken in that people were excited and welcoming and kind. And again, the best bit of advice anyone ever gave me, and I think this is something, I wish I got this advice way after I was running the Unicorn, was I think it was Kwame. I was in a conversation with another director, I think it was Kwame, and he said, when you take over a theatre, you should, and this is really scary for the first time, you should expect to lose a third of your team, a third of your audience, and a third of your funding. And that was, I wish I'd known that when I took over, and knowing that now, I'm trying, I think with your staff, the team, the core staff there, I think you kind of have to expect that, actually. And I think that's right, because you're going to go on a new journey. For some people, it's not they don't necessarily agree with your journey, but just that they're going, I'm not ready personally to go on that journey now, even if the organization wants to go on that journey. And sometimes people are not the right people for you. They might be the right people for your predecessor, not for you. But what I've tried to do, like slightly forearm with that, is kind of go on. You have to call it a charm offensive, really. Like I've tried to, with funders and with audiences, really try and message that I really want to welcome them. I really want them to stay involved. I'm really, that's been a big part of what I've been trying to do, which is like just meet people in Chichester, be really vocal about the fact I have moved there. I have moved my family there. I am committed to being like part of that population for the next, whatever it is, 7 years, 10 years, whatever it is, and get that across really importantly. And that, that there is a Venn diagram of, work and shows, both on stage and off stage. Just have an enormous like learning education and participation program. Like there's an enormous Venn diagram of that work and the work on stage that we are going to have like similarities about, and like trying to communicate that as much as I possibly have been able to, in the kind of hope of stemming that kind of losing audiences, losing funding, like that's kind of been a really big focus of what I've been doing. And obviously the number one thing has been getting to know the staff that I have. That's been the number one thing, and the artists that are under commission. Those are the two number one things. But the kind of other thing I've been trying to do in the last 6 months, 5 months, is do the other bit. And I also, what I did, George, was I got the job in January, and then what I managed to agree, because this is the thing nobody ever tells you, when you're an assistant director, it's a 6-month notice period. Mm-hmm. Some places it's a year, I think, but I have 6 months notice period, and that's a long time to be doing a job that you're going to leave. So what I managed to do was do 3 months full time for the Unicorn to get the whole of the next season in place for them, like see this whole season through, which I did, and then go 3 months part-time Chichester, part-time Unicorn, which I thought was a bit, it was difficult because I was living in London at the time and then traveling down and all that kind of stuff. But actually it meant that when I moved in July, I could hit the ground running. I knew everyone, I had times to have one-on-ones with almost everybody, like not everyone, but an awful lot of people, and team meetings, even if I couldn't do one-to-ones. So I kind of when I arrived, I did know people. And I mean, even if you're coming as an assistant director for the first time, you're probably going to have like freelance jobs that you've got going on, like in the meantime. And I would really say, if you can stagger it so that, you're doing a day a week in the institution before you start full time, is a real advantage. Like I wish I'd done that before, I hadn't, but it was good.
So it's almost like that period before you begin is about giving yourself a head start, meeting those people, feeling like you can hit the ground running to an extent.
Yeah.
And once you're there, let's not lose the money and the audiences and the people. There is a natural. Yeah,
there's some of that you can't avoid, but it shouldn't be because they don't feel that you care or that you put the time in. People are still going to leave because that's fine. But what I didn't know was how much cultivating just you doing it. How much benefit that adds to the organisation. I didn't know that.
So there's a bit of preparation there. Transitional period, and then you arrive, and it's very much about people. Yeah, completely agreed. And you mentioned the similarities between, or the differences actually in scale between Chichester and the Unicorn, and obviously this having been your second job. I mean, what already can you see are the similarities, and what are the big differences between the two organisations and the two jobs, I suppose?
Yeah. So I mean, there are loads of similarities. I'm really lucky, and it'd be really interesting. Obviously you ran a touring company, and you're always trying to find homes. And I mean, you did make an amazing home, the Roundabout, but you also had spent a lot of time finding it. I think I'm very lucky in that the two places I've run both had 2 spaces. Really brilliant to have 2 spaces. It's amazing. So you can have a smaller scale of work and a bigger scale of work within that. I would say, what I've loved about both organisations is the core team really believing in the mission of the organisation, and the audiences really believing in the missions of the organisation in different ways, but really that's a really nice thing. I think I'm quite a mission-driven person. So this may be absolute delusion, but thinking that I'm like doing some kind of societal good in some way, shape, or form is helpful to me. Like, you know, even if it's not true, it's motivating to me, if that makes sense. Like, you know, if you want to really save the world, be a doctor, you know, like I kind of get that, but you know, I want to believe I'm doing something positive. So those are big similarities. I think, you know, the financial pressures of running the unicorn are much great. Like there's just not, there's, you know, you running it with, and I know you will know about this as well, you're running it as lean as you can run it. And actually Chichester's really, really well run and is run quite lean, but there is a bit more wiggle room because we have shows that have, you know, commercial potential, and because we have shows that we receive for some weeks of the year, 12 weeks of the year. And that does, you know, it gives you, I think what I would say, for me, now I can see, and I was trying to do this at the unicorn and like had itched it back. You really need in these organizations, you need a period, I would say 3 months in a building where you're not making your own work, and which gives you a bit of time to change the culture or to reflect or to plan. Because when I started at the unicorn, the only month we had off was August, and I've whittled that back a bit, so there's like July and August now. But I kind of think it should be like almost most of June should be like, I would go, or maybe 10 weeks maybe, because 5 weeks is maintenance in almost any theatre, and then you just need some like, and then people go on holiday and all that other stuff. You just kind of need a bit of, okay, get everyone together. What did we do well this year? What can we do better for next year? What can we change? Like, but people always having to do that in the middle of producing shows, running a building, you know, stocking the toilets and the bars, you know, that's really hard. So, you know, this kind of inbuilt bit of time that we have, and we have received work, which of course we're open for and we're doing stuff and we're developing, but that bit of space feels really, really fulfilling. I mean, slight irony, because I had one outside freelance job. I only one, but it happens to fall through quite a lot of that, which is the thing I'm doing at the moment, the Christmas show for the RSC, the Box of Lights. But so I'm eating into my own like time this year, annoyingly. But looking ahead, and I still get some of it. Looking ahead, that's so valuable. Do you know what I mean? Like having that time, and I would say that, you know, the best advice, you know, anyone's given me is like, do less, but do it as well as you can do it, you know. And sometimes you can't always do that. Sometimes you do overstretch because you're ambitious and you want to seize an opportunity, and that's good. But actually, if you're kind of 50-50 about seizing an opportunity or just focusing on what you're doing, I would go on doing less and doing it better. You know, if you're like 70-40 towards taking the opportunity, take the opportunity. Does that make sense? Like, I did the wrong maths, didn't I? If you're 70-30,
you got an extra 10%.
You got an extra 10%. Yeah.
But actually, so what I'm hearing is that there's this sense of the two spaces is consistent, and that there's something really beneficial to that, because you can work on two different scales.
Yeah.
That sense of belief, that kind of sense of purpose, runs through the center of both those organisations and through you, actually.
Yeah.
But then the financial structures are very different.
Yeah.
What it can do. And there's that sense of a pattern emerging where you really need that downtime to reflect and plan.
Yeah.
To give yourself and to do less really well.
Yeah.
Rather than stretching. I want to hear more about Chichester and about your time at the Unicorn, but I want to go back a little bit, because one of the things that a lot of people have asked about is the process of going through artistic director job applications, interviews, all of that. Before we get onto that, though, just tell us, why did you want to be an artistic director in the first place, and then tell us how you managed to pull it off.
Yeah. So I didn't know I definitely wanted to do it. I mean, actually, interestingly, like just seeing yourself and James and knowing a little bit from that, like, you know,
put you off.
Well, you just know that there is a lot of extra pressures that, you know, on it. I mean, it's really interesting. You know, I would go, and I'm sure someone's going to name someone, you know, but I am not sure. Like, I don't know if you had like a completely blank slate and you wanted to be the best just director that you could be, would you be an artistic director? I'm not sure. Like, I'm not, like, genuinely not sure. Like, I don't know. because I think sometimes those additional pressures they might impact your work. Maybe not. I don't know. But my instinct is probably not. So, you know, on a purely selfish level, like it's not, you know, it may not be that thing. I went to a talk ages ago, you know, I think maybe it was when I was doing National Theatre Studio Directors Course. It might be then. It might not be. I can't remember. And I saw Marianne Elliott talk, and she was asked by people, you know, why do you not want to be an artistic director? And she said, because I've seen that to do that job, what you have to want to do is put your energy and your spirit into everything in the organization. And she was like, I want to save some of that for me. And I think, you know, but I went, I could maybe get behind that, maybe. Like, I didn't go, I couldn't do that at that point. So that's probably the first time I went, maybe. But then you know, my predecessor at the Unicorn, Punny, I did a show at the Unicorn, and she said, I'm going to, you know, hand my notice in, and I wonder whether you would be interested in throwing your hat in the ring. And I'd been approached a couple of times to put my hat in the ring, and I just hadn't quite been right for me. The audience is very important to me, who the audience are. And there was something I had such a joyful experience. I thought, well, maybe I could do this, you know. So that was on that thing. And I think you need a little bit of that. Like, I think you need a nudge. Most people probably need a nudge, and they're open to the possibility, if that makes sense.
And so you kind of felt open to it because of what Marianne had said, and
yeah,
conversely, you'd gone, I can imagine actually giving my spirit, my energy, and then somebody put the thought in your head, and that sort of external image of you as a potential artistic director suddenly then enters your head.
Exactly that. I think you've articulated that exactly right. Well, what about yourself?
Well, I think, you know, as you said, James and I were always co-artistic directors, and as far back as I can remember, you know, since I was 20. So I don't think I ever did think, I want to be an artistic director. He was just,
it happened.
Yeah, that's what he wanted to do, and I was like, that looks fun. I'm just going to stick with this guy.
Correct. Yeah.
But I think the more I figured out about what the job involved, the more I enjoyed doing work that the sum of which, the whole of which, was bigger than the individual parts. I think I was never a freelance director. I always wanted a grander narrative.
And I think, you know, in a way, that was the other, the third part of that thing. You know, like I was open to it. Somebody said, think about it. And I think the other thing was going, it is the one job that you can do in theatre, I think, where you can, at least for like a period of time, like create the change you want to see. Like, you know, I think that is true. Like, I've done a few, you know, now we're in a really interesting moment where, you know, post, like in the pandemic, loads of the kind of more structural imbalances have come up and are being, you know, people are much more conscious of them in, I think, a really good way overall. It's not uncomplicated, but overall. And I think, you know, I did go, if I, like, there are things I can do with representation in casting or so on and so forth. Where, like, if I run the building, actually, a really clear one was I just got to the Unicorn and I was like, I don't think it's acceptable if we're in London, cannot have all white creative teams anymore. The Unicorn had not had all white cast for a long time, but you know, and that was the thing. And I could do that in a way that I could do that myself as a freelancer, but no, maybe nobody does that for 3 more shows or whatever else, or 3 more years, or you know, whatever else. So I think those 3 things combined, because I think you have the ability to, you know, to create change. I mean, like you guys did with the Roundabout, going, bloody hell, we really want to take shows to Folkestone and, you know, Swansea, we can't do it. This gives us that mechanism, you know, and you can do those things.
And it's an extension of what you said initially, which is that you know, fundamentally need to believe that the work you create changes the world. And so if the work you create changes the world in that way, then doing something at a more macro level is an extension of that same mission.
Exactly.
So let's get into the nuts and the bolts, because I know that's going to be interesting to people. Tell me about your experiences of writing applications, of doing interviews. You know, I've spoken to a lot of people who've had a wide range of experiences applying for jobs, interviewed by huge channels, kind of complexities of that? What is it on earth that a board's looking for?
Yeah.
Like, what was your experience? What advice?
Yeah, really good. So full disclosure, I'd only applied to one other job, which I'd done literally like, I don't know, like, I mean, just out of finishing at Birkbeck. So I'd done it, you know, where actually it was like a touring theatre company, and I was just like, I just put an application in. So I didn't get an interview or anything, and I'm completely reasonably didn't, you know. So one, not counted. And then for the unicorn, I think I did an all right. The application process was like, you know, the classic standard covering letter, why, and I'm pretty sure that I did, you know, I looked at the person spec and the job description, and I tried to write my cover letter so it covered that, but also it sounds vaguely human, you know, so, you know, like, because also if you're just looking like you're just filling out the job description and the person spec, I think that reads really strangely. So a little bit about like why, and then kind of try and find a clever way of weaving in the things they're looking for. Obviously, the number one thing to say to anyone, having sat on a lot of panels now, please don't lie, or like, if you don't have the thing, just say, I don't have that, but I'd really love to learn about that thing. Just because honestly, like, it, you know, just be honest. You're not going to have everything, and there will definitely be things that no.
So can you just into what you mean, as in don't pretend that you know how to.
Don't pretend you know a thing when you don't know a thing, or pretend you have an experience you don't have. I mean, it's, you know, I would say that for any job, but particularly for these jobs, because you're only ever, this is a small industry, and that person's only ever ringing up someone and going, oh, so and so said you did a thing with them, and if you haven't done it, you're in all sorts of palaver. I mean, I would say that. Okay. I would say one thing that I had done, which I didn't mention, George, was I was very lucky, told by an idiot, asked me to be on their board. Mm-hmm. So by the time I applied, I had been on a board for a few years. So there was some, which I hadn't, you know, so I knew some of the processes by which, like, and now, to this day, honest to God, I cannot write a spreadsheet. I can't write. You haven't got to, I can't write it, but I've learned to really, obviously, read a spreadsheet and read a budget. You know, it's not complicated. And actually, really kindly, someone, the kind of guy that did the accounts, taught me through it. I would say to anyone who wants to be an assistant director, you have to be able to understand the proper lines of a budget and be able to really interrogate it. That is the thing. I mean, you're nodding. I just could not say that more. And a really good way of doing that is on the board, because you can see, like, governance decisions that follow from what a budget is presented. Like, I'd say that's really important. And then I'll be honest, I did an interview the day after a press night from the unicorn job, and I think I did quite a good application, and then I didn't do a very good first round interview. I was so tired and I wasn't in a good headspace. I would now, knowing what I know now, I would have gone, I'm really sorry, I can't do the interview that day. I could do the next day, and I would have given myself a day. I just didn't know that then, but I know now that would not be an unreasonable request. Just to delay it by a day would be okay. I mean, quite madly, on that same day, I was applying for that job. I was having my interview. I'd gone in the morning to do the second viewing of like a house that me and my partner were going by, and it was the day after my press night. I mean, it was an insanely mad day, and my partner was very pregnant at the time, so it was like all happening on one day that was less than ideal. Yeah, so I didn't do a very good first round interview, and then I went away, and I actually found partly because this is the other thing I would say to people, and having sat on loads of panels now as well, I talked too much. You're always better at getting people to ask you more questions about your answers than you are just waffling on for ages. Like, I would say, be brief with your answers. Answer the question, definitely answer the question. But don't feel like it's just about you talking, because actually that's not like helpful. And if you answer brief and they go, oh, could you, then they'll give you a specific thing, and then you keep being specific back. It's a much better thing than, like, I definitely did that on that person. And then on the second interview, I found it was much easier in a way, because the task was make a season that you would do. And it's loads easier because you could talk about the art. I would say with that, the thing that I did do, because I did this because I'd been on a board and so I knew, was I kind of worked out like the rough parameters of, like, I didn't be like, right, well, we're doing an Ostermeyer, Schimmelfenning play with 100 people in it, because I knew they'd never be able to afford that. So I looked at what their last season was, kind of worked out the actors and all that kind of stuff, and then like worked within a set of parameters to do that season, so that I could in the interview say, well, these are the fixed things that I've worked under. I've assumed, X, Y, and Z, and blah blah blah, and and then go, and then could relate it to work that had already happened. I'm sure probably you said this, George, at some other point, but obviously it's a funny thing, that exercise, because obviously nobody exactly holds you to that. But at the same time, you should play fantasy football, but you should play it realistically. Does that make sense? Like, don't be like, well, obviously Andrew Scott's going to come and do Rumpelstiltskin for me. Don't be realistic about what you're doing. That's not going to happen. So that was kind of how I approached that second round interview, and sleep, which helped enormously. So that's
what I've heard there, which I think is invaluable, Justin, is firstly that you said when you begin that application process, yes, you have to be covering off the tasks, the responsibilities with examples of where you've done something similar, but don't be afraid of saying where you haven't.
Yeah.
Also within that, I think you use the word why, which again is this purpose question about why do you want to be an artist director? Yeah. Why do you want to be an artist director of this company?
Yeah.
And that, I think, is about getting away from that kind of boilerplate, I've sent the same application for 3 different jobs, and really engaging with that purpose. And what you talk about in terms of understanding processes, how to read a spreadsheet, budgeting, that stuff is often so alien to freelance directors. Yeah. Never access it.
No.
You'll say to me, how do I get my hands on it? And I say, oh, well, you can ask producers, you can go on Companies House. But being on a board is
best way.
Brilliant example.
It is the best way. And because also the other thing is you can do it. I mean, like I said, the really nice gentleman who was for a long time the accountant on the board told me to talk me through stuff. But also in the board meeting, it's quite good to basically slightly ask, like, the ask questions of the budget and I mean, I'm going to say stupid questions, but I don't believe it's stupid questions. But you know what I mean? Ask questions that maybe are obvious to everyone else, but don't be afraid to do that, because it's how you learn stuff.
Just follow that on. My sense is, and I might be wrong about this, my sense is that boards are becoming more open to having younger people on them.
They want young people,
young artists, and they also have quite open application processes where it used to be a kind of slightly behind closed doors thing. Yeah. And so maybe
exactly. Both the Unicorn and Ginster in the last year, we've both done open recruitments for both of things. Yeah.
So would you encourage kind of young, aspiring, working freelance director to just put their hat in the ring?
100%, 100%. And like we, I'm pretty sure we've done this at the Unicorn. I can't quite remember, but definitely just we recognise you're a freelancer, so we will give you. There's a bit more expenses in the way of a freelancer doing it because they're giving up time than there are for other things. You get kind of honorarium of a certain amount because we know you're having to give up things. But you honestly. Because the other thing I say about being on board, why it's good, I think most people think being a artistic director means you're hanging out with artists all day long, and that would be wonderful. Like that would be really wonderful, but it's not that huge. Like it's a big chunk of the job, but it's not 50% of the job. Nowhere near that, I would say. George, would you say?
Well, I mean, running the Royal Court circa 1960, 1970, yes, you probably right. Artists in wine bars. Yeah. I think since then, definitely not. No, I think about 20%. I think of our time outside of we were artists.
Yeah, exactly. And it is trying to carve more of that time up. But you're on an uphill battle there because there's always. In all honesty, there's always a toilet flooding somewhere, or a disciplinary, and I would say that, like, again, I think this was quite useful, and this is hard, and I don't have my parents. Well, my dad worked in human resources, so I had some understanding of. Although I've been a freelancer all the time, I had some understanding of human resources stuff, like very loose, very general, very vague. But I did have some understanding of it. And that is another thing you will, again, and a board, you get a bit of that in a board. You could sometimes things come up. But that is a thing it's worth you know, particularly in a building, you are going to have to deal with human resources stuff all the time. You won't lead on that necessarily, but all of those decisions will run from, assuming you're the CEO, will run from you and the ED who's the joint CEO with you, or whatever. And even if you're not the CEO, that should still be going by you, because, you know, it's an organization in your mold. And that is, you know, having some understanding of that stuff, you know, and like, just full disclosure, like, that's some of that stuff's been, well, loads of that. But obviously I was an AD in the pandemic. Literally, that was like an awful lot of my job for a long time. You know, and also things come up that are like, you know, just being honest, like, you have to deal sometimes with things like the police, or, you know, like stuff like that, that's like well out of your normal remit. And you've got to be prepared for that, not for the specific, but the idea that that responsibility lies with you. And that's hard, I think.
There's something really interesting about that came up as well in my conversation with Lisa. When I asked Lisa about transferable skills from being a director to an artistic director, I was kind of fishing for loads of things like, oh, well, if I can schedule a rehearsal schedule, I can schedule a kind of organizational schedule. And in fact, what she said was some of the most useful things to her as an artistic director, she'd learned as a high-level exec assistant in her 20s, when she was essentially job for money in order to become a freelance director. And what I'm hearing you talk about is, in terms of that from your dad, that HR experience, you kind of had to reach out to an accountant for the financial experience. And it sounds like, is that true of you? Would you say that as an artistic director, stuff you've actually learned other places other than a rehearsal room? As
100% true. I mean, it's 100% true. I was a teacher after we finished at university for a couple of years, and again, like, weirdly, institutional knowledge, as in like knowledge of institutions, is helpful in a way. And like, you know, even when you don't like the way they do things, it's helpful to have other frameworks. You know, like you said, you know, obviously, yeah, running a happy rehearsal room, I think it does involve, you know, some of keeping the team happy and stuff like that. But I would go outside stuff is really, really invaluable, really. Like, yeah, I would say really valuable. But it is also like, the thing I, you know, got in the pandemic, which was great, was if you just ask people, most people will have had a, you know, will give you, other artistic directors will give you advice, like, and give you their time. Like, I can't think of any time I've ever asked anyone for help and they haven't given it to me. And likewise, if anyone's ever asked me for help as an artistic director, you know, sometimes I haven't known the answer, but you've tried, you know.
You had artistic director mentors in that sense, or?
Yeah, so I literally a week before the pandemic, I mean, I think, yeah, like 5 days before the pandemic, shut everything down. Not because of this thing, I'd asked Nick Heitner to be my mentor, because I'd never had a mentor, and I was like, bloody hell, it'd be good to have a mentor. And then he obviously proved really helpful in the pandemic, so that was a good bit of timing, because he knew everything that was going on. So that was a good, lucky bit of timing for that thing. But I would say, yeah, having a mentor, definitely great. Like,
you aimed high there.
Yeah, I did aim high. Well, it's because someone who worked at the Unicorn had been his executive assistant, so that was the reason. I had a good in with him.
It was a connection. Okay.
Yeah.
So in keeping with our kind of 20% of the time on the art, let's do 20% on the art. Tell us about programming. How do you program?
Yeah.
What happened?
Okay, so I think I can talk about when I first went to the Unicorn. I think I, you know, the thing is, I'm sure, like most people on the school and stuff, we're all enthusiasts for the art, right? That's what we're doing it for, because we really want to see these great, amazing shows. But what I did, and so when I first went in, I commissioned loads of artists that I loved and loads of ideas that I loved. But I think the job of being artistic director is to work out where the artists and the ideas that you love meet the audiences that come and watch your shows. And I think that that's been my learning lesson, which is genuinely not going, oh, they'll definitely come to this programmer thing, not at all, but going, am I programming a thing where I'm going to be able to communicate with them that they're going to love this, they're going to feel safe, you know, and then I can challenge them and do whatever I want and be as subversive as I want. But what are those things? And you have a few different levers in that, right? So, you know, sometimes it's a title. I mean, the Unicorn is classic for this. Like, we would do like well, like we're doing a version of the Odyssey, but it's not going to be like anybody else's version of the Odyssey, like a traditional version. It's told from Telemax's perspective. It's an all-female creative team, and blah, 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 you know, it's like a feminist kind of retelling of it. But you can get away with it a lot because the teacher goes, "I know what the Odyssey is." The parent goes, "I know what the Odyssey is." But you can then do it in a subversive way. Another way is you could do like a Chichester. I didn't program this, so no credit to me. But we just had Deborah Francis White, who does the Guilty Feminist first play. Never Have Ever. Daniel Evans programmed this. You know, it's really interesting. She's our core demographic in Chichester is the opposite of the unicorn. It's much older, but actually having Greg Wise and probably Susie Wokoma, in it made them feel a bit safer. And so actually completely sold out. And it's like, it's not about necessarily like, you can do challenging things but you've got to get the cocktail that's in, or the invitation right to the audience. And when I started, I didn't understand that in the way that now I really understand that. And I mean, and I think about this and, when we started, George, things like Spectrix weren't advanced, which is Spectrix is the booking system that you book your tickets on. Whereas now, Spectrix tells you everything about your audience. So you can know who goes and watches a comedy in a 300, in my theater, in 300 theater, on a Tuesday matinee. I could find out loads about those people just because of looking at their Facebook. I'm not a weird stalker dude, but I'm just saying, you have that level of detailed information so we can know more about our audiences. And that
two sides to that, aren't there? There's the kind of fear of programming by algorithm.
Yeah.
Or to take the positive spin, it's knowing what people like and being able to give them more of that, but occasionally challenge them.
Exactly. And working out it's also risk for risk's sake is kind of pointless. I think now, which I probably didn't think before. What you should do is go, okay, we're going to do X, Y, and Z because that's going to, keep everything happy on the balance sheet. But then I can take a hell of a risk on P, Q, and R because I don't need to because I've got that sorted. Mm-hmm. And it's just, and then what you're trying to do is make those audiences one. I mean, I think it's probably worth saying, George, that, when we were at university and Michael Grandage was running the Crucible, or Sheffield Theatre, sorry, I should say, he really got this right. Yeah. He could package difficult stuff up in an accessible way. He did it with a address book and, Joseph Fiennes and Derek Jacobi and whatever. But there are other ways of doing that as well. But it's making that all work, really.
Calculated risk. And you use the word safe, isn't it? It's almost like one aspect of it needs to be safe enough to kind of get you through the door. And then you can take risks with the other bits. Completely. I mean, and I suppose the one maybe exception to that was, at the Royal Court, a lot of the time you could, you used to be able to it was about people going for just a risk. That's what their audience built. I think that some things changed there, and I don't think that's necessarily true at the moment. I think because I think maybe that went to a place that even an audience that thinks themselves as an avowedly risk-taking audience have parameters and things they're not interested in, or so it's kind of interesting, right? Again, I'd have to probably look at the data to get a bit of a better idea of that, but you can kind of see that's what's happened. So, and then there are just plays that you just love and that you just think, I just love this play, and I'm just going to put it on because I love it. Or do you have to have that pragmatic voice that goes, I need to start, or I need to?
I think you have to have the pragmatic voice, but I think you absolutely can do that. Just then make your other programming work around that to support that. I think you totally can do that. I mean, again, if you get the star, great. But I don't, I think we've got to be really careful with all the star casting stuff because I'm not, but if you've got other things that mean that loss, I mean, that is, I suppose, the thing I have now, George, which is I'm really lucky for. It's huge in one way and scary. Because the festival theatre in Chichester is 1,300 seats. If you make that hum, so you're averaging over 1,000 seats in that place, well, you kind of can risk league-wise do what you want. Those kind of numbers of what you're taking at the box office, they're so big that you're like, well, do whatever. Have 20 people on stage, have 25 people on stage, doesn't matter. But you've got to be getting those numbers. I mean, and it's really worth saying that, one of the things that really attracted me to Chichester, like one was like the scale of doing shows. I like big shows, and being able to do a 25-person show really appeals to me, you know. But the other thing was, you know, not the other thing, one of the other things was actually the ticket pricing. You can see any of the shows just on any night. Doesn't matter how well it's selling, there are £10 tickets for audience members, guaranteed. And for 16th of the day rolls, there are £5 tickets, prologue tickets. If you join prologue, you get, you know. So that was a value. It's not about the actual amount of money that might, you know, but the idea that they would always guarantee, you know, you could pretty much see a show. That was really important to me. It was a really good shared value, that was a value they had and a value that I really cared about, you know. So that was, you know, really key.
You said at the beginning, it can be quite a lonely job. What are the key relationships that you have as an artistic director?
Yeah, so without a shadow of a doubt, the key thing is, well, obviously there are different models, because, you know, there's a few models where the artistic director isn't the chief executive as well. But assuming you're joint chief executives, the key relationship is with the executive director. I mean, you know, in all honesty, like, you spend more time with them than you with any other person on the planet. You've got to be okay about like calling each other at like 5 in or 12 at night. Like, you know, it's quite weird. It's really, you don't really have enough. I don't have a friendship like that. Do you know what I mean? I've got loads of good mates, but you don't. It's a very strange relationship, and you know, and you're not. The other thing is, like, you're not like your friends, but you're not. It's not like your primary reason you're friends, and so that is the key relationship. Like, you could. Because ultimately, like, I get on well. I like all of my senior management team, both in Chichester and at the Unicorn. I like them all. You can't, you know, and you cannot be friends with them. Like, it's a different thing. You could be friends with your executive director, it's fine. But, you know, because ultimately you've got to make decisions for the good of the institution, and you don't want anything clouding that. I don't know what it's like if you don't get on with the ED, because I've not had that. I mean, I don't know what you do. I'm not the right person, but you know, I mean, that would be like you know, I was not going to apply for the job at Chichester, and the fact is that someone from the board contacted me and said, "Could you?" They had someone contact me, and I was like, "I'm not interested. Send me the pack, but I don't think I'm going to do it." Then someone from the board contacted me, and then I spoke with Kathy, who's the ED there, and Kathy was the biggest at that point, the biggest reason I applied, because I was like, "Oh, I could spend all my time with you. Like, we could build a thing, we could make a thing." And I felt the same way, you know, about the people I work with at the Unicorn, firstly Annalise, and then Bailey and Helen, who were joint EDs, both great, you know, just, yeah, great. But if you don't have that relationship, I don't know.
And what is the nature of that relationship? Because I know, I mean, a lot of directors who just, because they don't have any contact with the directors, don't really have a sense of what that job is. I mean, I know some active working artistic directors whose preconceptions about the executive director has kind of really undermined that relationship. They take care of all the budgets, they do all the money, I'm sort of an I direct the plays, and it doesn't sound like that's what you're saying.
No, 100% not. Every bit of work on stage has to be as important to them as it is to you, and everything else that happens in the organisation, staff structure, the toilets, what you sell in the shop, has to be as important to you as it is to them. You don't have responsibility for it in the same way as, like, you're not line managing it or whatever, but you, like, I don't want, and the relationship has to be, you don't make decisions without talking to them, and they don't make decisions without talking to you. And that when you know, and we might disagree on things, but you find a thing that you both can stand by, like, that's the relationship. And you're united in front of the board. You never play off like the chair or anything. You know, you have to be a complete team. You know, you know, like, you find weird things out about yourself being an artistic director that you never find out as a director. Like, you know, like, actually, as an artistic director, I would always think of the best present. I'm shit at buying presents in life. Ask my partner, but, you know, I would think of the best presents to buy, like, you know, donors, or the best invitations to send, or like weird things that you're like, I don't understand how I'm good at this, you know. And likewise, sometimes, you know, I've made shows and they're like, this needs razzmatazz here and here. You know, you have to trust them artistically, and they have to trust you commercially. It's a weird, you have to kind of have a thing there where you're like, oh yeah, I feel this, you know.
And is that just the luck of two people kind of getting together, or do you work at that?
I think you have to. I think I think you have to let. I was quite lucky in that. Look, if you don't get on with that person, don't apply for the job. Like 100%. I would say that actually to you. If you're thinking of applying for an AD job, and you may do this after the first round, if you got through the second round, but definitely in the process, you might do it before then. Ring up the ED and say, "Can I take you for a cup of coffee, or can we have a phone chat? Could we just discuss it?" You'll get a sense, because there's no point, honestly. If you run a theatre and you're at war with the ED, I can't even. It would be, well, I can think of someone who knows doing that. It would be miserable. Like, you'll just be miserable. Yeah, you will just be miserable. You don't want to be in that situation.
Very, very important relationship. Are there any other key relationships around?
Look, you have a really, because of what we do, you have an incredibly tight relationship with your producer or producers, because essentially they will report into you in that kind of a way. And then theatres are different. So at Chichester, both my theatres, I've line managed the learning, they have different names, but those departments, sometimes jointly, but line manage them. And obviously you line manage all of the freelance artists that work in the building, so that's big. That takes a lot of your time, in a fun way, often. And then like Daniel, my predecessor at Chichester, he was the line manager for the director of marketing and comms. I don't want to do that, but they report into me, but I don't want to do that. But weirdly, I've taken on the joint line managership of the director of development because I quite enjoy development. So like it works in different ways depending on the organization.
It's fundraising.
Fundraising, yeah. Sorry, yeah, fundraising. Yeah. So it works in different ways. The chair and the board. I mean, you've got to get on with the chair and board. I mean, that you've got a bit more wiggle room there because essentially, like, you can get rid of the chair, but it's hard. But you can have a say on the makeup of the board, and you should have a say. Like, that's the thing. You should come in and you should meet the board, be nice to the board, and have a good time. But you might go, you and the ED after a while go, we're lacking X, Y, and Z. Do like a skills audit, or that kind of person doesn't embody the kind of values I want in the organization, or just I think we need some new ideas because I don't know about X, Y, and Z. I don't know about digital, for example. We should get someone digital on the board. Or I don't know about sustainability. We should get. So those are your main kind of relationships, I think. The board, the ED, the producer, undoubtedly, and then probably one or two of the other heads of department.
Okay.
And the other thing worth saying is, other thing that to me matters enormously, I can't say whether this matters to everyone, is like the front of house team, like I want them to like that's the bit that's like the feeling that you engender in the building. So I've always spent a lot of time walking around the front of house team, like talking to people, finding out stuff, and trying to be like, okay, maybe we approach this way, maybe we need some training here, maybe we do that thing. That's always been really important to me. Yeah,
that's really interesting because you wouldn't necessarily assume you have to spend time with the front of house, but they are it's sometimes the only people.
Most of the time they're the face, right? Most of the time they're the face.
Yeah. We've got just over 5 minutes left, so I want to ask you 2 more questions. And the first one, I want to just zoom out a bit and maybe talk about something that's a bit challenging at the moment, which I see a lot of artistic directors leaving post. I see some theatres choosing not even to have an artistic director anymore.
Yeah.
What's going on?
So yeah, I definitely got views on this. I mean, I don't know. I mean, yeah. So I think there's 2 things here. One is, and again, it's not me being like, I think the industry as a whole is incredibly hard. We're recovering from a once in a lifetime event, and it's turned everything upside down. I think, in the same, I think social media is it makes it harder to do things like being an artistic director. You do get a lot of people don't go on it basically anymore, because I just go, like, if you believe them all when they call you a hero, you got to believe them all when they call you a tosser. So I try not to do that, try to stay away from it. But I think that makes it hard, and you get quite a lot of that. Some people get more of it than others, but you get quite a lot of that. I think that's hard. I think it's really hard to make work in like an inflationary spiral, whereby like the materials and the real things are going up and up and up, and you need to keep wages up. It's really hard to make that process work. You can do it, but it's really, really hard. And I think I genuinely think we as an industry have spent quite a bit of time looking in, quite rightly in some ways, but I think it's gone into a strange place. Like because all these structural imbalances have come up, which need looking at. Like, I'm not in denial about that, but we've kind of then got in. We should look at them and then do something about them, and but it's gone a bit inward and continually inward looking, and we've stopped having a conversation with our audiences and having too much of a conversation with ourselves. And I don't think that's good. And you've got to be able to walk and chew gum. You've got to be able to look at yourself and go, we're not getting this stuff right. How can we make ourselves industry more equitable? But you've also got to keep audiences coming to shows, because there's no point otherwise. So I would go, those three things: the kind of recession or the inflationary spiral, the kind of the stresses of the job. It's stressful. And it was particularly stressful, obviously, in the pandemic, because it's like everything was being done last minute. It was all uncharted. No one knew what was going on. Everything happened at the last minute. Guilt of feeling like freelancers were in a much worse position. It was very hard. So I think that took, I was at the Unicorn 5.5 years, but probably the pandemic adds another year on your time. I just think it just did. It's stress. But I think this thing about we need to get back out to our audiences and talk to them, I think is really important, just straight out.
And to finish, last question: when you think about the future, you think about Chipster in the next year, 2 years, kind of what keeps you up at night and what gets you up in the morning?
Totally. Basically, it's exactly the same thing. So the average age, full disclosure, the average age of Chipster is our audience members is 68. I want to keep all those 68-year-olds. I want them all coming, but the fastest growing segment of the population is the 30 to 45-year-olds. So they don't come. So that's my job. It's like, how do I get them coming as well? So that's really important to me. And aligned with that is like, how do we nurture the next generation of artists in a really more considerate way? And that's hard. And that's not, again, it's going back to you can't do everything for everyone. So who are you going to help, and where are you going to target your support? And that is an ongoing conversation, at the moment. Like, where can you help people, and where do you have to be? Because also the best, oh my God, I've got to say this before we finish. Sorry, George. The thing that I'm trying to do the most now, which I didn't do when I started the Unicorn, and you can't always do it, because I'm trying to be, if I can't give you a yes, I try and give you a quick no. And it is the hardest thing, because sometimes you're like, oh, that is interesting, and I don't know, but I think it's trying to give people, this is from Nick Heitner, trying to give people a quick no so they then can put their energies elsewhere. Trying not to leave people in limbo. And I cannot, there's probably people on this call that I've left in limbo. You cannot always do it. But trying to do that, be more rigorous about it. That's really, that trying to do that basically, yeah.
Right. And I love that the same thing keeps you up at night, that gets you up in the morning, and that's that drive to get that audience in through the doors. Yeah.
That's the thing. I mean, the amazing thing about Chichester, which again was a really big thing for me in joining it, was it wasn't built by the Arts Council or the local council. It was the money for it was raised by the people of Chichester in the first place. And there's something about that spirit that's not always good. It can be problematic. It's very proprietorial. It hasn't always been the most welcoming. I think Daniel and Kathy have done an amazing job of making it much more welcoming, but continuing that sense and that sense of ownership and serving the community, and also being like a steward. Like, I want to leave the theatre in a better position than I find it in. I won't achieve that on all levels, but I want to achieve it on as, I feel I can genuinely leave with the Unicorn. I can be like, yeah, not in everything, and there'll be things I've not done as well, but I go, yeah, I left that in a better place than I found it, and I found it in a quite nice place. So I feel that, and that's what you want to do. You want to leave it.
That's a great place to finish. One step beyond do no harm is leave it in one better step on than you found it, if not more. Justin, thank you so much for your time, especially when you're in rehearsals. I hope you get some. Thank you to everyone for joining. I'm really pleased to have everyone on the call. Sign up to the mailing list if you haven't already. You'll find out about future events. I've got another very exciting guest coming up next month in November, who you'll be the first to hear about. And yes, thank you very much for being with us. Thanks, Justin. Have a great rest of your day.